Hello, and welcome to So You Think with Pastor Terry again on Monday, November the 9th, I do believe. And we are so happy to have you here with us. And welcome to So You Think, the show that is spiritually relevant, culturally significant, and that encourages people to look at life issues in a non-traditional way. We're so glad to have you here with us today. We are really have a great show in store for you all today. And as I said, I want to take some time. I want to introduce my co-host, Cedric. How you doing, Cedric, today? How you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you there?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the show again.
Yes, sir.
You ready to get down into it again?
Ready to get to it, boss.
All right, man. We're gonna jump right on in then.
All right.
We got our guest here with us today. We have Taylor Jones Pearson. Taylor Jones Pearson, MSSW. She is a recent graduate of Spalding University with her master's in social work, as well as she works for the youth villages, doing family preservation work, but also she has experience working in domestic violence shelters. Our next guest will be Martina Sharp-Greer, and she is the assistant professor of sociology at Stark State University in Canton, Ohio. And we're so happy to have you with us, Martina. Welcome.
Hi, thank you, Pastor Terry.
Welcome. And like I said, we are really looking forward to the topic tonight. The topic is So You Thought We Weren't going to Talk About Abuse and Domestic Violence. This is going to be a deep show. We're going to take this 30 minutes and we're going to jump right on in. But before we jump right on in, I want everybody to know on the lower part of the screen, we have a number for the National Domestic Violence Abuse Hotline. So wherever you are, if you are in California, if you are in Colorado, if you are in Arizona, wherever you may be, Detroit, DC, wherever you're seeing this is a number for the National Domestic Abuse Hotline. But we also have a number there for teens who are experiencing domestic violence in teen relationships. And so we are really, really excited about this tonight. We want to get into this because we really want to help somebody. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send comments and put them in the comment section, and we'll get to those as the show goes on. We're not going to mention your name, so don't feel like we're going to mention your name. We want to keep that totally anonymous. So if you really want to ask a question, just send the comment. Put in the comment section, and we'll be glad to get those asked for you. So with that being said, everyone, let's sit back and relax. And so the first question is, can somebody just tell us what is domestic violence? Either one of you.
Domestic violence can go in between financial abuse, emotional, physical, sexual, any of those things.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it actually, Taylor, you're absolutely right. And it's really kind of oftentimes pigeonholed into just physical or sexual. But, there's coercive, there's digital coercive too, when somebody's online and kind of managing what you're doing or stalking you or disallowing you to be, out there. So it can take a lot of different forms, Taylor. You're absolutely right.
Wow. Okay. Wow. I see. I mean, you just educated me right there, because everybody, I always thought it was just the emotional and the physical. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So you really helped me. But I do have one more. I have another question. Is that because everybody always hears about this from women on the women's side, but can men be victims of domestic violence too?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, really? Wow. Is that a common thing, or is it something is it rare, or?
It's actually more common than you would think. I was looking at the stats, and I'm not going to go through them. I can't find them right this moment, but I think it's like 1 in 10 or 15 men or something like that go through domestic violence. But because of our cultural standards, we don't necessarily think that they do, or if they do, we don't necessarily take the same type of understanding for men who go through it as we do with women.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. That's funny you say that, because I know that I remember I'd gone through some situations, and I had a brother who used to always say, "Man, that's abuse. That's physical abuse." And I'd be like, "It's just talk." And I used to blow it off. And I know that as men, that's what we do a lot of times. We blow it off, and it never really gets reported. And there are some aggressive ladies out here. And I just want to really be one of the first to put this out, is that there's some very aggressive ladies out here who maybe they've grown up in an abusive relationship, and that's the way they show their love. You know what I mean? But just hanging with our topic here, how is it that me as a man, as I myself, how can how can I get help in domestic and violent type of relationships like this? Because I don't want to hit the woman. And
Go ahead, Martina.
Oh, okay. So, the first thing is to kind of understand that because you have been targeted, and I don't like to use the word victim. I don't like that word at all. I like to say the target. Because you have been targeted doesn't do anything with your manhood. It really doesn't have anything to do with it. Everybody's human. Yes. Everybody can experience this, and everybody can come into a situation where they do have somebody who is overly, prone or tentative to do that, or tend to do that rather, because of maybe their background, because of maybe some issues that they've dealing with themselves or that kind of thing. So, the first thing to do is to really reach out to maybe a domestic violence shelter, a domestic violence hotline. Those organizations work with both men and women. And even when there are, there's a need to shelter someone, away from their home, there are locations for men to be sheltered as well. So, a lot of times men don't think those are available, but they absolutely are.
Oh, really? Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Well,
I never knew that either.
I didn't know that. I mean, that's great. Oh, I have a question then. What are some of the signs that someone may be in a domestic violence relationship? Taylor, could you answer that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some of the signs that I've noticed when I did work in a domestic violence shelter was just pretty much the survivor's guilt. Like a lot of the girls that were in the shelter, or women that were in the shelter, they would really blame themselves or just say, oh, well, he just did it because of this reason, or just making excuses for the man who abused them. Also, some other signs is just isolation from family and friends. That's another sign. I think some more that I looked up was just being overly worried about pleasing their partner.
Okay.
That's another sign. And also never having money, always asking their partner for money because they're broke. So those are just some signs that I looked up and I found online.
Yeah, and actually, I heard of one that's there people that things that the abusers show is that they can be extremely jealous.
Yeah.
Extremely jealous and controlling. They really insist on the person that they're in a relationship with on stopping, like having certain leisure activities or spending time with family and friends, like you said, Taylor, and things like that. I mean, it's like really, it's kind of like these behaviors kind of like sneak up on a person, right? Right?
Yeah, that's kind of. I'm sorry, Taylor. Go ahead.
I was gonna say that usually, like, the power and control wheel usually starts off like the honeymoon, and then that tension rises, and then that's when we start seeing the other side.
So it starts really, really tiny, and then it grows and it's very gradual. So you don't really notice that when I go and hang out with my family, all of a sudden, instead of calling me or texting me once or twice, it grows to 5, 10, 20 times. And then if I don't answer, all of a sudden you're angry. There's a little bit of aggression when I get home, kind of thing, right?
Right.
And it's funny because with domestic violence, a lot of times I think that the person being abused does not recognize it in the beginning, or maybe they recognize it and they, like you said, Taylor, they kind of make an excuse for their partner. And then they this is a thing, I think this is the trend, is that they start to adhere to what the a more dominant person, the abuser, I'm going to call it like that, they start to adhere to what the abuser wants. And then over a period of time, it's kind of a habit for them. And that's one of the things that I personally had to really get a grip on, right? Because I was like, this is how they are, how she is. She's just like that. That's her way of showing affection. But it really wasn't. It was a form of abuse. And a lot of our young adults today, they don't even recognize it because they've been dealing with it for so long, and I think it's a really good topic tonight.
Yeah, I was.
Go ahead, Taylor.
Oh, I was gonna piggyback on what you said, Cedric. As far as like the women, they stay, they realize that they're being abused, but I think that they stay just because they feel like they don't have any other options out there. They stay because this is all I'm gonna get. This is what I'm meant for, and that's it. Just settling, basically.
Wow.
Absolutely. Sometimes it's a situation too where, and you're absolutely right, where they're so kind of diminished in their spirit and in their psychological state that they feel like there's nothing else. They don't deserve anything else. Or even, there's sometimes where there's a financial aspect of it where they don't have, like you said, they're broke. They don't have any money. They don't have any resources. So they have to stay, or they feel like they have to stay. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's a matter of life or death. And so they feel like, and they know that there could be a real situation there. If they try to get away, it could be really problematic.
Yeah, it could be disastrous. Yeah, it's funny. I was reading some statistics before the show about domestic violence, and I started looking. There's a study, and I believe it's from 2018, 2019, but it says that domestic violence is most common amongst women between the ages of 18 and 24. And check this, and the thing that really made me look at this study more was that it said that the rate of marriage in this age group has steadily and basically says steeply declined over the last 50 years.
Yeah.
Wow. So domestic violence has a direct correlation with teens or young people not being married today. And so I guess I would ask you as two beautiful young ladies, like the dating. I've heard of young women, very young. Actually, I'm gonna say young girls, being in violent relationships. But what's the thing that keeps them there? I mean, is it love? Is it just fear? What actually keeps them there? And when they recognize that they are there, I know we've got the domestic violence hotline rolling on the screen, but how do they really get it? How can you help them see that this is not a healthy relationship?
Like you said, I believe that a lot of younger women, and I believe it's around that age range because that's the most vulnerable age. So yeah, I believe that they stayed mostly because, either for money, they believe that the guy has all the money to take care of them. I mean, it could be a variety of reasons as to why they stay.
Absolutely. And for kids, and I say kids because 18 to 24, they're young people, and so oftentimes they're not really cognizant of what a healthy relationship looks like, because oftentimes what they see at home is modeled in an unhealthy way, or even some of the stuff they see on TV is unhealthy. Some of the things that their peers do are unhealthy, and then when they're so in love for the first time, maybe they don't recognize, they don't get it, and so they're blinded to that. Grooming is what you were talking about earlier.
Okay, there you go, grooming behavior.
All right,
they literally just kind of fall in line, and they don't realize until it's too late.
Okay. Wow. Well, before we go on with any more questions, we want to make sure that if anybody that is watching this podcast right now, or listening to this podcast, the domestic violence national hotline is being scrolled at the bottom. Please, if you are in a domestic violence situation, please feel free to call 1-800-799-7233. Or if you are a teen or young adult, please call Love and Respect at 1-866-331-9474. But also, if you're watching this podcast right now, please feel free to ask questions. Put them in the comments. We'll get them. We'll pose them to our panelists, and they'll be able to hopefully answer those as we go through the evening. So please feel free to join us. We look forward to answering those questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask those, and we'll make sure that our panelists answer those questions. But now let's continue on. The next question I have is, does this happen in the LGBTQ community as well? I mean, because I know that's a community that's really growing nationally, and does it display itself in the same way as? So Martina?
It does. And it happens more often than oftentimes even the community wants to kind of recognize, because there's such a stigma with being LGBTQ plus, first of all. And then particularly for men who identify as gay or men who have sex with men, it really is that compounding of not only am I a guy, now I'm gay, and now I'm being subjected to this. So there's that kind of stigma. So it happens very often.
Okay.
Often, and I looked at some stats myself today, and some stats say at the same rate, and some stats say even a little bit higher than in the straight community. And that may be because of the stress and the strain with being part of that community and kind of having no outlet. So the problem, I think, is, that because the community has been stigmatized in the way that it has, a lot of resources have not been allocated historically for that community. And a lot of focus has not been given historically to that community to recognize what it is. But the same kinds of behaviors, the coercion, the digital coercion, the financial, the psychological and emotional abuse, that's really, really big, particularly when you got a community who already feels like it's like they're very limited in their options and resources. And so if I can control you and make you think, hey, you really don't have anybody else but me anyway.
Well,
So
I have a question.
Yeah.
What is digital coercion? You keep on saying that. What is digital coercion?
So this idea where I'm online and you're looking at all my stuff, or you're, monitoring who I'm talking to, and I'm just hanging out on Facebook, or I'm just hanging out on whatever. And you're manipulating the conversation. You're kind of questioning, well, who is this? What are they doing on your Facebook? And I need you to have a joint one with me, or that kind of thing, where you're really kind of, I don't want to say stalking, but it's almost like stalking in the digital era. So so there's that too. And especially since it's becoming so prevalent, where it's so online, that's part of it as well. Yeah.
Okay. Taylor, do you have anything on that?
No, I would have to agree. Like, even just if you're with somebody and, you're posting, like, just even a post, a random, just sharing a post. Or was that about me? No, it wasn't about you. I was just sharing it.
Right.
So, yeah, definitely.
So that's a form of domestic violence kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I have another question then. Because, I'm a pastor. Elder Crutchfield is a minister as well. What should the church's role be with addressing domestic violence? How should we go about it? I mean, this is something that's gone on in the church for such a long time, and nobody said anything. But we want to be able to create a climate in which people feel safe to be able to address those issues or get help for those issues. So what should the churches do, or churches' role should be to address those issues?
I personally feel like churches should have support groups within the church for people who are struggling with those things. I think that would be really beneficial.
Okay.
Or even workshops to kind of educate people on domestic violence.
Okay.
And it's interesting. I did my master's thesis. This was the topic. This literally was the topic.
Okay.
And so it's interesting that there's good news in that, based on what I saw, other stuff, has come out since 2007. There is a great deal of support that's there built into the congregational setting, right?
Okay.
So the members are supportive of each other. A lot of times, people know what's going on, and so they offer that support. As a pastor, though, as the church structure is super important to kind of remind the congregants that this happens even in relationships where people are both in the church. People are not immune. But it's also, important too, to remember that clearly we're talking about biblical kind of aspects of marriage and what, the roles of the individuals are, but to remind the congregants, especially the guys, and I won't say it happen with women, but especially the guys, headship doesn't mean lording over and battering. And sometimes people.
All right.
And that's exactly what, some of the findings that I had were that, that those traditional understandings of marriage really did kind of, for some people, lead into the belief system that it was okay. So kind of that's what the church can do, is get the message out. Yeah, traditional marriage is great. This is what we're supposed to do. But there is a limit to being a head of the household, right?
Right. Right.
I was gonna piggyback on Martina. I feel like there needs to be a little bit more education on what submission looks like in a marriage. Yeah.
Talk about that, Taylor. Go ahead.
The Bible, I'm not even gonna go.
Go ahead. No, we want you to go there. Go ahead.
I just feel like there needs to be a little bit more education on that, because I think with some people view submission, it means my wife does everything for me, or cleans, the typical stereotypical wife duties, but that's not what that means.
Right. Go ahead.
So I think it needs more education on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Pastor Terry, I remember we had an incident in our church before, and you and we had the opportunity to speak to both, and I will tell you that when I was able to look at the situation and hear both parties, I'm gonna be honest, I had trouble identifying who the abuser was versus the abusee, right? The person being abused versus the person that was handing out the abuse. And I will tell you that in my, and again, I'm not a trained therapist or anything like that. I will first put that out there. But in having a conversation, I found that the person reporting the abuse, honestly, was the more aggressive of the two people. I bring that out to say that a lot of times in domestic abuse, when the person being abused is actually the one who's acting out, I guess I would say it like that, who's really seems to be the most aggressive. How do you deal with situations like that? Because it can be very confusing, since somebody in the church is saying, "Hey, I need help," but they seem to be the overbearing and controlling person. For me, I wanted to just back away and not say anything to anybody. But as we're on that topic, how do you deal with it? I mean, as Pastor Terry asked, how should we deal with something like that? My personal opinion, I will put it out there right away, is that, man, I want to say, hey, let's call somebody, because I don't know how to deal with this. How should you deal with an issue like that?
And I think let's call somebody is a good thing. so sometimes you need to, and I mean, and within the church confines, you can counsel. Absolutely, you have the scripture behind you. You have all of the biblical kind of expertise, and the Lord's is squarely within that venue. But sometimes you need to have a voice that is separated and away from the situation. As a pastor, your congregants. You're kind of, I don't want to say you're torn, because you're not, because you're listening objectively, but you still know everybody. And so to be able to have an objective ear and somebody who is trained in order to kind of manage that situation is probably a good thing. So calling somebody ain't a problem.
It's not a problem.
It's not a problem. Okay, call somebody. And that's like the big thing for us as men. Like I tell you, when my brother I used to take it that he was making fun of me, because I was like, man, it's all good. She just a little angry, but really call somebody, because now that I'm approaching the young age of 40, on the other side of 49, but don't tell nobody, I'm approaching that young tender age. Is that I realized back then I was in my 20s, and I'll tell you something. I had a job in the military that required us. Everybody's seen the movies when people go into Iraq and Afghanistan and kicking down doors and stuff. Well, that was my job, but I had a tiny little wife at home, 125 pounds, who was she hated my job. So she was just very, very aggressive, right? And I'm just like, wow, how can somebody wow. And my brother, he was on the outside looking in, and he used to always tell me, man, that's a form of abuse. I'm like, man, she's a little bitty girl. She just talking, But, I want to let the guys know who are listening is that, you can be as big as Arnold Schwarzenegger. You can be a big burly guy, and you can be a man's man, but it happens to us from time to time, and we should not be ashamed to report it.
Right.
We should not be ashamed. And I'm gonna tell you, as a man, I'm kind of embarrassed even saying it on the air, but it's the truth. And I want every man to know that we should not be ashamed. And we were talking about same-sex and gay relationships. I don't know if that's the politically correct way of saying it, but hey, that's where I grew up. I was reading a study on the study I use, and I'll tell you guys, I look at the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. They have a website, and I look at their website, and they talk about the statistics. Men, 47 point, I think it's 47.1, 47.9% of gay men are being abused. That's half, right? That's basically half. And then of that, they're more likely to suffer physical harm and require medical attention. And that's serious. Like I used to make fun of guys in high school. I'm not ashamed to admit it. I used to make fun of guys in high school who were gay, right? But to understand and to know that lifestyle is tough as it is, and they don't need all of the extra criticism that we, even as clergy, even as church members, even as family members, they don't need all of the extra that comes with it. And what they really need is help. You know, throughout this election process, one of the things I've been telling people is I'm hopeful. I'm back to the message of hope that Barack Obama had back in 2008. I'm hopeful that our communities will come together in love and respect and honor one another. You know, that's the only way we're going to get this country back on track. And the whole topic of domestic violence, I mean, let's face it. It's in our faces every day. We can no longer ignore it. You know, and we need to protect the ladies as well. We need to protect all people in relationships, men and women. So
there you go.
I'm gonna be quiet and digress.
Well, we're going to go ahead and start wrapping it up. And I mean, that was a great way to close it out, Cedric. I really appreciate that, and I really thank our guests for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Martina, thank you for being with us. Taylor, thank you for being with us tonight. And we'd like to thank each and every one of you all for being with us as we dove into the topic of, so you think that we weren't going to talk about domestic violence. And so know that if you are in a domestic violence situation, please, there's a number that's being scrolled. Call it, the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-7233 or Love and Respect at 1-866-331. Let me get it right here, 9474. Please call, get help. Get help. Please join us next week on So You Think, as we're going to be talking about So You Think We Weren't going to talk about homosexuality. That's what we're going to be talking about.
All right.
We're going to hopefully bring some understanding so that we can all understand that people are people and they require respect and love. So thank you for joining us, and thank you all. Hope to see you all next week.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right.